Eight, six, five, four, three.
Hi, I'm Diana Montford. The world's first transgender television journalist born male became female. I have to say that on every show because the gay political system wants me to, because we need our history. So now you have our history. There you go. So anyway, my guest is a truly unique person, a brilliant producer, metaphysician, everything. This man is a Renaissance person, if ever there was one. Mr. Hercules Invictus. And yes, that is his real name. Hercules Invictus, hello.
Hello, Diana Montford. How are you? I'm honored to be on your show, and I'm looking forward to our conversations. They're always
And I'm honored to have you on my show, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So let us converse. So tell me, what are your upcoming projects? Now, why don't you tell us first about your blog talk radio and your Zoom shows very quickly, that you do.
I have a bunch of shows that I've been doing for years. I've done thousands of them, and basically we explore life and its many multitude and wonderful dimensions. And these range from the physical to the metaphysical. We go after what is the correct way to eat for different people. How do you exercise? What is politics all about? We do have politicians on the show explaining what their function is and how people can get more involved and letting us know about upcoming events. So it covers the matters of living in this world, and then it explores other worlds. Where do we come from? Where may we be going? What is our reason for being here? And so forth. We don't really provide a definitive answer, although many of my guests seem to have a definitive answer that works for them at that particular point in time. But we explore all the different possibilities. And I'm very blessed to have met many phenomenal people, including Diana. And we explore the inner and outer universe very frequently, and the journey never ends. So I'm very happy.
And I'm very happy because the third Saturday of every month, from 9 to 10 Eastern Standard Time, two friends and I do a transgender podcast, also called the Diana Montford Show, but it's really like a three-person show. But because the Diana Montford Show is sort of a brand name for all things trans, we're still using that name on the podcast. But if you're interested in learning what the newest laws are against us and other things, other tranny Jim Crow things, which they are throwing at us left, right, and sideways, you might like to tune in. It is from 9 to 10, third Saturday of the month, Blog Talk Radio. And my colleagues are Catherine Platine, whom you have seen on the show many a time and hopefully will continue to see, and another guest you've seen a lot, attorney and politician Joanne Principali. Anyway, now, well, what are your future projects? What do you have on the pipeline coming down the future, Hercules?
Well, let me explain a little bit about where I am right now, and then I can put everything that I'm talking about in some sort of context or perspective. I'm in my mid 60s, and I know that the life before me is less than the life I've lived behind me, unless modern medicine comes up with a miracle shot or a miracle pill. And I'm looking back like everybody does when they reach that age. And, there's some things I wanted to do but didn't get around to doing. There are many things I learned about what to do and what not to do in certain, situations. But there's many paths I didn't take. So at this particular point in time, I'm looking back on my life and trying to pick up pieces I left behind and see if I can cultivate them or integrate them into me. And I'm also seeing if I can find a way of experiencing some things I would have liked to do, but didn't get around to doing. So, for example, one that pertains to what I'm doing now is when I was younger, during the 70s, I was a deep trance medium for a theosophical spiritualist group operating in downtown New York. And I did that for about half a decade. And I decided not to take that path. I was giving sittings, they were called back then, in people's homes and rotated around from place to place. And I started speaking at the United Lodge of Theosophists in the East 70s and in other places. So I never really did that or anything with that. I took a separate path in my 20s when I decided to plunge myself into the world and have a career and have a family and do all the things that
Sure, yeah.
in our day and age. So I'd like to try to spread all the esoteric knowledge that I've gathered during the course of my life. And remarkably, the context of it, even though it's changed from period to period in my life, it hasn't changed drastically since I first started. So I have a body of impressions and opinions and lore that's in my brain that I'd like to share. So I'm finding ways of sharing that sometimes on my own teaching, which I've done on and off, both metaphysically and teaching in colleges throughout the years, or experimenting with paths that I didn't take, like, for instance, with entertainment. I've talked to large audiences, I've talked to small audiences, I've had a television show, I've had podcasts, now I have Zoom shows and so forth. I've been published in over 21 paranormal anthologies, and I have a couple of things that are coming out in the very near future. So I've experimented with all that, but I haven't really made as many movies as I would like. So I made one movie. It was called The Conquest of Lake Placid, and it showed at film festivals, and it was on MNN actually, in its two parts before we made it into a shorter movie. So I want to make another movie or two or three or four, whatever I can fit in. So I started working on a television show that'll act as a support to that and will lead into it. And I started writing down ideas. In some ways, this will be a continuation of my old show called Thor the Barbarian of like 20-something years ago, which also showed on MNN as well as on UHF and in other local cable stations. So I plan on evolving that concept, getting together as many of the people as I can still locate. Some of them have alas passed on. And just see if we can make like a reunion show and redefine the adventures we had back then, now that we're all in our late 50s, early mid 60s and 70s. So it'll be about that as well. When you're younger, you think you're immortal. When you're older, you know that maybe your soul is, but you're not. So all those life understandings that come to eccentric people trying to do their own thing, that'll be the main focus of the new rash of entertainment.
Is there an audience for that? In my experience, sometimes people do not like to think. They like the tried and true, and they like the trite and true. They like, dumb sitcoms and other stuff. They don't like intelligently written things. And that's been getting worse over time. The dumbing down of our nation is awful, and it's happening more and more these days. Who is your target audience?
Anybody going through changes in their life where basically a page is turning or a chapter is ended and a new chapter is beginning. And I think that's a universal enough experience to humanity that some people will be interested in watching. And there are a lot of people who belong to different fandoms, like certainly science fiction fandom and horror fandom and fantasy fandom. There's cosplayers, there's role-playing gamers, there's LARPers. So a lot of people feel disconnected with this particular time and place, so they try to find other places where they can live and have their experience. So I think they'll identify, even though there's slightly different, it's more metaphysical than fandom related. But I've also explored the different fandoms where people might go if they feel that they come from another planet or so forth.
Do you mean they feel they actually truly believe that they come from another planet, or it's just a game they play?
No, some people play it as a game, role-playing games and LARPs and
What's a
convention,
LARP?
a live-action role-playing game. That's where that's what it's called now. It used to be called role assumption back in the days in the 80s when I was experimenting with this in the early 90s. Um, but it was called role assumption back then, where you dress up a certain way. You might wear prosthetics, makeup, if what you're trying to be is radically different from a human, and then you act out the part. So now it's called LARPing, and they have rules like the role-playing game community has to determine whether something happened or didn't happen, whereas before it was all improv. But
Well, the actor studio people do that too, the method people, you've heard of Lincoln,
yes,
Daniel Day-Lewis trying to live as Lincoln while he shot the film. So, I mean, as far as he could, given, that he lived today, uh, Daniel Day-Lewis, but, yeah, that's also an acting exercise.
I have
And
a
that doesn't have to be from outer space. You can be, well, Lincoln if you want, or live in 18th century France as far as you can, whatever thing you want. And you try to emulate that. And I know a couple, and they're big into World War II England. They live in New York, but they actually like do rationing and everything so they can experience World War II England. Whatever.
And we have that freedom to do that. And it's wonderful that
Yeah.
you can explore another lifetime while you're living this lifetime in rather than just reading about it and fantasizing about it, you could find a way to live it out and anchor it here and live it out here and to take the lessons that you're learning here in this society and apply them to something that happened a long time ago or vice versa. Because we gain wisdom at all stages of our soul's evolution and through all our incarnational journeys. So we are timeless beings. Why not experience some of the timelessness here?
Yes, I've heard a psychic once told me that you can be born today, but since all lives are simultaneous, you can actually be alive today in the 21st century, but you can also, in your future life, there is no future life, but as we humans count futures, in your future life, go back to, say, 15th century Spain or something.
Yes, I've heard that too, and I believe it. Anybody who's explored the paranormal or the metaphysical, one of the conclusions you have to eventually come to, and it's very hard to come to it and to embrace it, is that time as we know it is a construct.
Mhm.
That it exists insofar as we allow ourselves to be bound by it. And in order to experience what we're experiencing here, you need something linear that unfolds, but that it doesn't exist the way we've been told it exists, and that it is possible to transcend time both forward and backward. It is possible to experience what's going on from multiple perspectives. And there are different ways of doing it. You could do it recreationally. You could do it as a means of attaining wisdom or information. There's a lot of freedom that we have that we don't take advantage of because we believe in the construct we've been given culturally.
Which is so far from the way things really are that you really wonder who in God's name invented this very reductive, tiny sphere of experience that we're supposed to have so that we are not considered insane.
Well, there are organizations made of people who want to control other people. So a lot of the rules that we have for existence are determined and imposed and reinforced by these groups. Some of them know what they're doing, it seems, and some of them don't. It's just traditions and the way things are and how we've always done things, and they feel very threatened if anything deviates from that. But the social control mechanisms are needed, again, to have some sort of structure through which we can all experience reality. So they are a necessary thing, but not necessary to the extent that they control and enslave other people.
Now, when you say you want to make movies, how do you make movies on a limited budget? Because, you're not a big Hollywood studio.
Well, I was inspired by Trauma. Are you aware of Trauma Entertainment? When I was growing up, the
No.
Toxic Avenger, Tromeo and Juliet. They made like low budget schlocky movies, and that became their brand.
Sort of
So
like Ed Wood or something,
yeah,
yeah.
so it was like that, except more intentionally. Ed Wood was unintentionally who he was.
Flacco, yeah, I mean, well, yeah, that's the way it
These
goes.
are very intentionally, and take advantage of their low budgetness. So I learned from watching those movies, and when I had my TV show, I used to produce a show every other week. And when people who were in the industry would guess how much I spent, they thought I'd spent tens of thousands of dollars per episode. I never spent more than $400 on an episode.
There,
So
well, that's really good filmmaking, and that's really being a genius at filmmaking. They say that Joseph von Sternberg, Marlene Dietrich's favorite director, could suggest a crowded ballroom just by having 2 or 3 extras behind her, some confetti, some streamers, and
right.
sound effects that would sound like a crowded ballroom. And people thought, wow, it's a crowded ballroom, you know?
And we had New York City as a backdrop. So we did a lot of filming here and there. We worked as much as possible with the local chambers of commerce and local government so that we had permission to film. And some places like parks, everybody filmed in the park. So we didn't like really go out of our way to get permission to film in the parks.
Well,
Uh,
excuse me, in the film Love Story, they stole all the shots on the Harvard campus. They
did
just drove in and stole the shots. They shot and then they zoomed out again without getting permits or permission. And in North by Northwest, there's a scene where Cary Grant goes into the UN forbade Hitchcock from shooting there. So he parked a van in the street with a hidden camera and had Cary Grant just walk up the stairs. And that he got a shot.
creative filmmaking.
Yeah.
And again, that was a fun journey. That was among most of one of the most fun journeys I've ever had, one of the greatest adventures I've ever had, and it lasted for about a decade.
So
And
what's your next film going to be about?
um, I'm not going to share like specific details, but it'll again do the theme of what if you're an eccentric person, you've lived your life eccentrically, and now you're getting too old for your eccentricities in the sense that you're not as able to do. I have several ailments that prevent me from ambulating as much as I did when I was younger. So sword fights and things like that, which I got involved with way back then, they're out, unless I get a body double to do the sword fights. So it's just that it's like everyone else's journey through life, except this happens to be mine. It'll be exaggerated a little bit to make it more exciting, and it'll be toned down in places as well. But I'm telling a story, and I'm inviting other people to tell their stories. And most of the folks who are involved are going to be people who actually lived through these events or through these periods of my life with me. So it'll be, how can we create art as we are preparing to leave this place and do something else somewhere else?
Now, you talk a lot about that, and I mean, you're not that old. So, and you're a bodybuilder. So, I mean, oh, wow. How would you feel about living to be 110?
That'd be fine. If I'm going to be here for 110 years, that'd be great. And I'll still be figuring out things to do
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
at that point. But this is where I am now. And again, I doubt if I'm going to live to be 120 years old or 100,
Well, you never know. Why not?
37. Yeah, maybe like they might come up with miracle pills, miracle
If
medicines,
in
miracle
1980 you told
vitamins.
people about smartphones, they would have said you are crazy. Like a walkie-talkie with a television in it? What are you, nuts or what? That's what they would have said, and now we all use smartphones
I,
or
wel-
iPhones or
I,
whatever.
I welcome it if it happens, but if it doesn't happen, I'm doing this now just in case it doesn't happen. If I can continue to be here and to do creative things that share my perspective and my thoughts, then I will do that then. Who would have thought that anybody with a $20 camera from Walmart can produce their own show?
Or they filmed that movie Tangerine, about two transgender hookers with phones. You know,
Right.
talk about, it's like a no budget film. And the girls did their own hair and makeup and wore their own clothes. It was like a no budget film. And I think it was at Sundance and I don't know what else.
Barbara Becker Holstein, who's one of the hosts on my podcast and on my Zoom shows for YouTube. She and I have been doing television on and off since the very beginning of when I was doing TV and things like that. And she pioneered a lot of the selfie films, and they've been to film festivals. They've been written about in magazines, and so yeah, I remember when that was an idea inside her head, and nobody was doing it. Now, from what you're telling me, other people are doing it as well.
Sure. And very well too. So yeah. I think really that you probably have a great future as a filmmaker, and you know, right now you're in a sort of slump, a state of flux, trying to figure out what to do next. But as soon as you find your sea legs in your next career, you're going to live to be however old you want to live, you know, to be.
That would be awesome indeed. I don't really feel like I'm in a slump. It's just this is where I happen to find myself at this particular point in time. So given the fact that it seems that I can't do what I was doing before, what can I do next? But I've never strayed really like from this exploring life and adventuring in life. I've been a therapist. I've worked in psychiatric rehabilitation. I've worked in workforce development. I've taught in colleges. So I've done a lot of conventional things as well. But I always did everything my own way. And if I look at my life as I've been doing, there are certain themes that seem to be playing themselves out at various points in my existence. And I wasn't totally conscious of what theme I was living out until in retrospect, years later, I'm looking back and remembering or talking with people who were there at the time and getting their impressions on what was going on, which sometimes is radically different than what I thought was going on. But that's okay. I've learned to treasure that as well. But we live in a remarkable world and full of remarkable people doing remarkable things. And I'm overwhelmed, and I appreciate the differences and the remarkable things that people are doing. And a part of it is not just defining what it is to be human, but redefining what it is to be human, expanding our perspective, expanding our definitions. And that's a very exciting journey. And it saddens me that there are forces at work in our society that are trying to keep us stuck back in certain periods of American history that weren't very nice for everybody. And they're not
Just for
content.
you, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're not content to do what your friends are doing, being in England during World War II, or was it World War II?
And they live in New York. I love it, you know?
So they're living out their ideal life, and anybody can do that. You know, you could be
Well,
from
you go to their house for
Filipino.
dinner, you know, well, we only have 1 ounce of cheese because, you know, the ration
Of
stamps.
course.
And you're into it. You say, I totally get it. Yes, you know, you get into it with them, you know?
So we all have the power to do that, and yet some people want their role-playing game, their live action play to be something that everybody's doing. And why would
Don't we all do that as children, though?
yeah
When
we
we're playing, I mean, and we believe it as we're doing it. We
Mhm.
know we're playing, but we also believe it at the same time, you know? When I was a little kid, I used to play movie. I used to imagine a big camera in front of me as I walked down the street. I
Mhm.
knew there wasn't, but I imagined it and I could almost see it, you know? Funny, huh?
My cousin did that when he was a child. He used to pretend that he was a disc jockey on a radio station. And he used to have his like tape recorder and his record player that played 45 records. And he used to have like a fake microphone. And he used to do that. And he became
I know, he's a well-known disc jockey
yeah,
too.
he's in the Hall of Fame in New England for his
Isn't that
disc jockey
great?
work. It's fantastic, and he played it before he became it. First, he started to get to know people who were famous at the time, like Cousin Brucey
Oh,
and
yeah.
all those guys. He got to know them. He got mentored by them, and then he started working. So yeah, through play, he became
Well, he
what he
manifested
deemed
it, you could
himself to
say.
be. Yes, and we all have the power to do that.
And he's very successful. I've heard him on your podcast on your show, and he's been quite successful, actually. Do you want
Yes,
to mention his name?
Ron Carson.
And, I mean, anyway, so, what do you reckon? Now, so many people are hidebound by the day-to-day, daily grind of their crappy, awful jobs, which they hate, which, I've done crappy, awful jobs, you've done crappy, awful jobs, everyone does. And they just don't have the energy to let their imaginations fly. What do you recommend for people like that who really can't afford to quit because, they can't? Their
Well,
bills.
they can continue to work to earn money to pay bills and to support themselves and families. I mean, and again, the career is a game. I used to be a vocational counselor, one of the many hats I wore. So once you know how to plot out a career and identify your skills, then it basically becomes a game. It's like, all right, I don't like working here. What can this give me toward working someplace I'd rather work? So you focus on cultivating those skills and you start looking around, learning to speak the lingo of where you want to go and seeing what opportunities exist, and then start going out on interviews. And eventually you get hired and you get to live that. Volunteering is something that you could do. If you want to get experience and you can't afford to go to school, you can get the experience directly by volunteering at in a place that does what you would like to one day do, or in a place where you'd like to one day work. I used to create student internship volunteer programs, and one of the main virtues of that program was that the agencies or the schools or the organizations used to try the person out for a number of months as a volunteer or
Right.
as an intern. And then when they needed to hire somebody, they had people that they already tested out. So
Smart.
within a couple of years, almost all their hires came from the student intern volunteer program. Until then, there was a lot of pulling of teeth. People had no time for volunteers. Oh, it's a waste of time, energy, and money. And the same arguments, place after place. But then in place after place, after that short period of time, they had a hiring pool that, again, they tested the person out. They saw the person learn. They saw the person
Well,
master the
we're
task.
almost out of time.
Sure.
So why don't you tell us how people can contact you so they can find all the many shows and projects you do, and like the Blog Talk Radio shows, the Zoom shows. How can people contact you?
To view the shows or to listen to the shows, they can go to Blog Talk Radio, that's one word, and they can look under Hercules Invictus. They can go to YouTube and also look under Hercules Invictus. And to contact me and interact with me, they can go to Facebook and contact Hercules Invictus. There are several different accounts that I have to do different things. The picture of me near Mount Olympus is the one that is most active in terms of my interacting with people, and I try to get back to people within a few
Okay,
days.
great. Anyway, my guest has been the amazing soul, Hercules Invictus. I strongly urge you to look up his many projects and to keep abreast of his new projects. I am DIANA MONTFORD. This has been the DIANA MONTFORD Show. Hey, I love you. Even if no one else loves you, I love you. I'll see you next time. Bye.
And she does. She really means it. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
My pleasure. Please come back.
I will.
Okay.